Hey guys, welcome back to the show. Before we get started, I want to remind you about two things. Number one, the Women's Longevity and Resilience Retreat is happening again for the third time this November from the 1st to the 6th in Cabarete in the Dominican Republic. It's going to be amazing. We still have a few spots left. We've got a few ladies already signed up. We're super excited. They're super excited. You may be super excited to be the next person to join us. So spending 5 days with yours truly by the beach, nerding out on biohacking, nutrition, supplementation, and all the things, plus doing sunrise walks on the beach, doing yoga, getting body treatments, playing with biohacking toys. If any of this sounds even remotely interesting to you, head on over to natnidham.com, check out the retreat tab at the top of the page, and you can book a Zoom call with me and my co-host, Dasha, and we can answer your questions and see if this is a fit for you. The second housekeeping piece is Mighty Networks, my private membership community. I would just love to see you there. It is a great community. We do have lots of fun in there. We do lots of N of one experiments. We have experts, like people who were on the podcast who come in, give private talks, answers people's questions. Very often they'll have special deals, or they'll offer people the opportunity to do really cool N of one experiments. It's a really, really, really cool community, you guys. It's small, and that is what makes it so special. So if you want to learn more about it and you want to join, go to natnidham.com, click on the BSP community tab at the top. You'll get to learn more. And don't forget that if you join as an annual member, you get instant access to my Peptide Crash Course 2.0. All right, let's now get started. Do you want to know why I prioritize Primadine Spermidine by Oxford Healthspan as a part of my daily supplement stack? Well, guys, it's simple. It's one of the best longevity tools that I believe we have available to us. Spermidine improves health span by inhibiting 9 of the 12 hallmarks of aging, including stem cell and mitochondrial dysfunction, telomere shortening, inflammation, and gut dysbiosis. Plus, it even supports memory, cognition, and heart health. Not only that, but the above the bar benefits that people experience and see very often within about 3 months of starting, they will notice that their hair gets shinier and thicker. They may find that their eyelashes get thicker, their skin improves, their nails grow really fast. It's really cool. I have seen this in myself, in my family, and in my clients. And the last thing that a lot of people will notice, and this is particularly with the original formula, they will notice massive improvements in their deep sleep. So if this all sounds too good to be true, you actually don't need to take my word for it. Just head over to oxfordhealthspan.com and read the borderline miraculous reviews from other users. And if you want to try it for yourself, use code BIONAT15 to get 15% off. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about this episode. Look, guys, over the past 20 years, there has been a transition in the discussion around mental health. Now, more than ever, there's been a really heavy focus on stress, anxiety, and the impact they can have on our overall health. However, the ability for people to engage with techniques such as mindful breathing and meditation has also decreased over the years. As a matter of fact, I've spoken to a lot of people, a lot of clients who find that trying to meditate or trying to do breath work actually stresses them out. It's a bit of a paradox. These are the things that are supposed to help you, and yet in some people, it can drive more anxiety. So today, I'm joined by Stefan Chmelik, co-founder and inventor of Sensate, to discuss why it's important to focus on regulating our nervous system and how embracing discomfort and taking risks is the key to transformation and development. We also dive into the technology behind Sensate, the benefits of using Sensate, and the different use cases. Now, I'm going to share with you my experience with Sensate. I'm going to admit that for the longest time, I had a Sensate and it sat in the box. And it took me forever to open that box. I don't know why. Don't even ask me. And here's how I have found that Sensate has been a total game changer for me. I use my Sensate at night in bed as I'm falling asleep. I have my noise canceling headphones on. I've got my Sensate on my chest. My favorite track is the sound bowls and chants. And I fall asleep to my Sensate. Very often I'll just sleep with my noise canceling headphones on. I keep them plugged into my phone. My phone's on airplane mode. And I will tell you guys that there's literally almost nothing that has allowed my HRV to recover to levels I haven't seen in many, many months. So it's made a massive impact on me. Now, I will tell you that different technologies impact different people differently, but I keep hearing this over and over again from people. So If you're someone who's looking for a way to regulate your nervous system and improve the amount of quality sleep you're getting each night, you're definitely going to want to tune into this conversation first. Don't just take my word for it. Stefan is inventor of the Sensate technology. He's a lifelong meditator and the founder of London Harley Street's New Medicine Group. He's a technology innovator and physician with 30 years of clinical experience, working with tens of thousands of patients experiencing stress and anxiety. And guys, this guy oozes passion. You will see in this interview, he just can't help himself. Like, he is so passionate about what he does. And he is now entirely devoted to leveraging his significant and unique experience towards achieving maximum impact for Sensate as the ideal consumer solution. I mean, this is a guy like so many people who figured out, look, I can't do it alone. I need a tool that can help me to get this help out to as many people as possible. So if you're someone who thinks they might be helped by Sensate and you want to give it a try, just go to getsensate.com/Nat and you will save 10% off your Sensate. And I believe you have a 30-day trial period. If it really doesn't resonate for you, but then you can return it. But I'm telling you guys, give it 30 days of consistent use. All right. Don't use it once or twice and say, it did nothing. Give yourself some time and get into it. Find your favorite tracks. Okay. Now, one more thing before we dive into the episode. I want to thank our sponsor, Berkeley Life Nitric Oxide. Guys, if you've been listening to this podcast, you've heard this before, but if you're new or if you've never made it to this spot before, if nitric oxide is not part of your daily regimen, you are definitely going to want to listen to the rest of this message. Get this. Your body is home to over 60,000 miles of blood vessels. Nitric oxide is what helps circulate blood to all those vessels through vasodilation, which is and while made naturally in the body, we produce less nitric oxide as we age, resulting in diminished blood flow and less effective circulation of critical oxygen, key nutrients, and glucose. Berkeley Life is my daily go-to for nitric oxide support. I take my 2 dietary nitrate capsules in the morning, and I'm good to go. The more I learn about nitric oxide, including its impact on proper hormone balance and even oxidative stress, the more I encourage my clients to join me in incorporating Berkeley Life's easy daily supplement into their daily wellness routine. It's in mine every single morning, those 2 capsules down the hatch. Now, Berkeley Life's high-quality supplements are available on berkeleylife.com. The only thing is that you need to be a practitioner or have been referred by a practitioner to get access. So all you have to do is register a consumer and use my practitioner code NIDDBL when you register and check out for 10% off your first order. So once again, that's NIDD, the first 4 letters of my last name, BL for Berkeley Life, when you register and check out for 10% off your first order. All right. So thank you so much for being here. Enjoy the episode. If you get value from this episode and know somebody else who will, please make sure that you share it. And if you're feeling inspired, by all means, please leave us a review on whatever platform you're listening to the podcast, because this is how we rise up the ranks. We reach more people. And more importantly, we get you more amazing guests. Enjoy the show. Hey, folks, just a quick reminder that all of the information presented in this podcast is for information purposes only. No medical advice, no diagnosing, no treatments suggested here. Before you try anything that you hear about or learn about here, make sure that you check with your medical provider. Stefan Chmelik, welcome to the podcast. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Natalie, so nice to be here.
So we've, of course, as people know who listen to this podcast, we've been chatting now we could have recorded a whole other podcast before the podcast. But that, I think it's funny. I find that having good podcast conversations with guests, it's a little bit like we need a warm up. You need a good warm up before you work out. We need that kind of getting ourselves on the same wavelength. So I'm really excited about this conversation, of course, because, in this day and age, anything that anyone can tap into to help calm and regulate their nervous system is going to benefit them. So
absolutely. And I love talking to experts like yourself.
Thank you. Well, the feeling is mutual, and I'm looking forward to tapping into your expertise in this area, because you have a couple of decades of work behind this whole endeavor that we're going to talk about today. So I think before we talk about anything, let's dive into a little bit of this conversation around stress and anxiety that, I have to say that, I don't know, was it 15, 20 years ago? I don't know that we talked about stress and anxiety and the way that we do now. It's like either it's become an international obsession, or something's going on in the world. And I think we all know something's going on in the world, but
Something's going on.
But you started this journey a long time ago, before we were in the state that we're in right now. So maybe you can talk a little bit about your body of work and how this all kind of came to pass.
Yeah, I mean, it seems that, looking back, everything always seems inevitable, doesn't it? But I was brought up in a household where natural medicine and philosophy was the norm. So Dad taught me and my brother to meditate when I was 5 or 6. I've been meditating for decades, five decades or so. And my practice became more and more specialized in working with people with stress and anxiety and trauma and PTSD in particular. That seemed to me to be an area that was poorly managed by most interventions and by mainstream medicine. And it seemed to be an area that I understood particularly and had sympathy with, and where I could help. But I think I'm sure partly from my own background. I mean, I think a lot of healers, they come to it from a kind of wounded healer kind of point of view. It's our own journey, and it's through helping others that we also heal ourselves. So my dad was a war refugee from Poland, undiagnosed with PTSD, but I'm able to see, looking back, that's clearly what was going on for him. So that kind of informed my childhood growing up and my adulthood growing up. And when I formed New Medicine Group in Harley Street, and I've been practicing for 35 years or something, we specialized in different areas, but my particular area of interest was people with, as I say, anxiety, etc. And I've been using sound for a long time in what I do, various techniques and nutrition and acupuncture and herbal medicine, and lots of body work, lots of breath work, meditation work, but particularly sound. I started sticking speakers under pillows 30 years ago and evolving from there.
Yeah, interesting.
And we were the first people to have a big clinical technology called Satori, which you sat on as like a Zen zero gravity chair with headphones, and this would relay low frequency sound and oral sound through you. And it was sitting on that technology, meditating one day, the whole concept really for the Sensate technology was downloaded, and that was in 2015. And then we developed it from there. So I tested it for a number of years with real patients in clinic to determine that it really was having the kind of impact that I wanted. And then when it was clear that it did, then we formed the company and made it available to the public. And that really, for me, is the thing, talking about stress and anxiety, is I worked out for myself that I wanted to be in a position to have maximum impact. So I realized that, being in an upmarket London clinic, I could see, tens of thousands, a few thousand people over the rest of my career, and have a wonderful impact on, on those relationships. But that impact wasn't going to be enough to stem the tidal wave of stress and anxiety and trauma that was really engulfing the world. Because what I'd really noticed is that people's ability to engage with the techniques that I'd been using for decades, meditation, classical breathing techniques, mindfulness exercises, etc. People's ability to engage with those really stopped.
Yeah.
Over a period of a few years, it became really noticeable that people stopped being able to meditate. They stopped being able to do breathing exercises. And I got to the point where I just give people kind of 10-minute app-based exercises to do, because they were no longer able to do, hour or 45-minute ones. And even the 10-minute app ones, they'd come back and I'd say, well, how did you get on? And they say, well, I sat there looking at my watch, waiting for it to finish, or, or actually sitting there really willing myself to relax and actually feeling more anxious. So I realized there really was a problem here.
Yeah.
And that using willpower to try and overcome anxiety clearly wasn't going to work. As Professor Andrew Huberman says, you can't use the mind to control the mind.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, there's no end of people and methods now to try and hack past the mind to get to we're actually, what I'm seeing, and I think all of us are seeing, is, and there's humans are nothing if we're not creative and resourceful, right? And so you have things like microdosing mushrooms or ketamine therapy, or even acupuncture, in a sense, hacks, it kind of bypasses or hacks through the nervous system, and tries to find ways around all of these walls and defenses that really we put up, or our subconscious puts up, ultimately to protect us. And those protections kind of sometimes they prevent us from being able to heal in many ways.
Well, that's exactly the point. So we've had a vagus nerve for 400-500 million years, maybe longer. We've had what we can call a human brain for maybe about 1 million years.
Mm-hmm.
So the autonomic nervous system, the lower brain stuff, is so much more deeply wired into our cells and our body and our connective tissue than the frontal cortex kind of logical thinking stuff.
Right.
Which is why, you can have a panic attack irrespective of how intelligent or well educated you are.
Mm-hmm.
It's nothing, because the brainstem, the primitive survival mechanisms will override any logic, and let's say fear almost always is illogical.
Yeah.
There's no actual danger.
Well, yeah, unless you've got something physically coming at you, or
but in reality that's incredibly rare. Yeah. So for the average person, probably 2 or 3 times in their life, to actually engage the flight or fight response is useful.
Mm-hmm.
The other 99% of the time, it's just all it does is make you anxious, because your body is responding by producing adrenaline, but there's nothing to actually fight or freeze from.
Right.
And that's really the issue, isn't it? So we've become the dominant species on the planet by having this wonderful evolved sense of threat perception. But technology has developed so much faster than we have evolved, that now the things that are chasing us are no longer bears or tigers. They're emails and messages and workloads and to-do lists. And there's nothing, you can't do anything. You can't run from those. You can't fight them. You either do them, or you don't make a choice not to do them and to do things differently. But the physiological response is the same, which is the release of adrenaline.
Right. And you mentioned PTSD earlier. And in that bucket, I would also put things like early childhood trauma, the life experiences that happen early enough. And so you've got your PTSD, which is actual trauma that is impactful enough on the person that it resets their nervous system into that heightened state ongoingly. And then we have, I bring up the early childhood trauma because I just interviewed a gentleman by the name of Dr. Bruce Hoffman, who deals with a medical condition called mast cell activation syndrome, and which is a physiological condition. Yep. And when I asked him, what do you consider to be the primary driver, or what do you see most often in people who have the worst case of this condition? And his answer was early childhood trauma. And so it's interesting. And I don't know if in our world today, there's more instance of early childhood trauma, or is all the pressure that parents are inadvertently putting on their kids because of the world that they live in, creating a situation for small children where they are now kind of being put in a situation of feeling pressure, which we could call stress, earlier in life, that basically is wiring their bodies to be in this fight or flight. And you're smiling and nodding as I'm talking, so I'm going to stop describing this. But so the short question is, do you think we're also inadvertently have created an environment for our kids that's setting them up for these issues, with all the best intentions? But
of course, always with the best intentions. Parents always have the best of intentions, and let's not be too hard on parents. Most of the time,
no. Listen, we all do the best we can with what we've got. And there's no manual. So
exactly. But I think there's a number of words which are used much more widely now than they used to be. They've become destigmatized, which is a brilliant thing. So stress, and trauma and PTSD. These are words which people will use very widely now. People will apply to themselves, and sometimes they're used accurately, sometimes they're maybe used too lightly.
Yeah.
PTSD certainly is a very specific thing. A lot of people have elements of trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And I think with so many things, from wheat intolerance through to allergies, through to asthma, through to trauma, they're because are they being assessed more?
Yeah.
Or are people more liable to have them, and are people actually having them more?
Yeah.
I think the answer for all of those is both.
Yeah.
So wheat is different now. People's gut microbiome is different. So people's likelihood to have some kind of gluten or wheat or whatever intolerance is higher. But also we're much more likely to notice it and be aware of it and therefore diagnose it.
Yeah.
So the two, and the same applies with stress and with trauma. So there's, and I'm very grateful and thankful for this. There's a much higher recognition now of the role of trauma and overwhelming experience in people's mental and physical health. And obviously specific events, either repeated events or single one-off events, which are sufficiently overwhelming, can cause PTSD, like symptoms, post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms. And I think it's important to realize that it's not really so much about the event as the person. So some people, and that is in no way a judgment, right? So
no.
Yeah, so some people will be traumatized from something that somebody else might not be.
Yeah.
And also one person might become traumatized from something that they at a different time in their life they might not have been traumatized by it. So it's whatever overwhelms the nervous system at that point, to the extent where the information is too much, the system shuts down, and then that information gets kind of encoded, locked into the connective tissue, the body. It becomes somatized.
Right.
Because although you can measure it obviously with in the brain, trauma, like most feelings, aren't really anything to do with the brain per se. These are really body feelings.
Interesting.
So the route into treating them is not the brain necessarily, or talking either, but things that will enable the body to process the trauma. The body keeps the score.
Yeah. Good book.
Is one of the great books on the subject.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I'm now increasingly interested in is the concept of anti-fragility.
Yes.
And I think we used to talk about resilience a lot, and markers for resiliency, such as HRV, etc. What I've kind of understood and realized now is that resilience, you can build resilience into anything, including a mechanical object, right? So you could make a really resilient car, but eventually it's going to break down if you ride it hard enough. Anti-fragility is unique to biological organisms. Yeah, so it's the idea that you actually get stronger as a result of stress.
Right.
And given that most of us aren't going to go off grid or into a situation where stress is not part of our lives, stress is just part of most people's reality, and you could even say it should be.
Well, I think the statement that without any stress we would essentially die, there's truth in that. That's like there's such a thing as hormetic stress, which is a little bit of what you're talking about, which is it's a little bit like, if people who access homeopathic medicine, which is the notion that minute amounts of a toxin will help the body to deal with it, teach the body how to deal with it, or allow the body to learn how to deal with it, so you become more resistant to it, as it were. And a hormetic stressor as well, applying stress to the body in a small enough dose that you're able to deal with it, and it becomes kind of this whole what doesn't kill you makes you stronger kind of idea.
Yeah, exactly. So coffea, which is homeopathic coffee, is used for insomnia and anxiety, for instance, as I'm sure you know. Yeah, exactly. It's about the ability to adapt. So stress in its pure in the real term just means one force acting on another.
Right.
When the vast majority of the time when we talk about stress, we're talking about negative stress, obviously. Stress that we're not easily coping with.
Right.
And obviously the opposite of the bane of anti-fragility is comfort.
Interesting.
So one of the biggest things I really have understood over the last few years that we all need to do more of is become a bit less comfortable.
Yes. Yes. That's such an interesting concept, right? And this is where I think we're seeing the things come out in our space, like deliberate cold exposure or sauna, like exposing the body to extremes of even just temperature.
Yeah.
That elicits a response that ultimately, when you remove that stimulus, leaves you more resilient, more anti-fragile. So
yeah, exactly. I mean, the important thing is though that it's not too extreme,
right,
because if somebody goes into a cathartic state, they just tend to re-traumatize and reinforce a negative feedback loop.
right.
But what I would say very strongly is that transformation, change, development is only possible outside of your comfort zone.
Right.
But the thing is, you mustn't leap outside of your comfort zone, because it'll be too much and you'll run back in screaming, and then you'll never want to do it again. So you put a toe outside your comfort zone, you get comfortable with that, and then you put another toe out. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's this process of kind of titration where you're moving in and out of comfort. You're moving gently into discomfort.
Correct.
And that includes allowing yourself to be hungry, allowing it to be cold and yourself to get cold, allowing yourself to have less light. Yeah, because light is lots of things about light, right? We shouldn't have blue light, we shouldn't have overhead light at night, we should have red light in the morning. But just functioning in darkness or semi-darkness is a really, really useful way to develop our anti-fragility.
Interesting. That's actually a really interesting idea. No, I haven't had that discussion before.
I really encourage people to turn off the lights.
Yeah.
I don't mean stumble around literally in the dark, although at night I do literally have no lights. At the moment I'm contemplating a darkness retreat. I've done many silent retreats, but I am a bit scared of the dark. I think it's completely normal and natural for human beings to be a bit scared of the dark. So one of the things I'm doing is looking at possibly doing working out to a 10-day darkness retreat.
And so that's an interesting concept, but wouldn't that technically make a mess of your circadian rhythm?
Well, light comes out of darkness.
Okay.
So it would reset your circadian rhythm. Yeah, there was a woman recently who did 500 days in a cave, for instance, in darkness.
And
she thought she'd done about half that.
Really?
Interestingly. Yeah. So, I mean, our circadian rhythm, our biorhythms are being messed up the whole time through LED, blue light, exposure to light at the wrong time of day, not getting early morning sunlight. Remember that just a sheet of glass will cut down the positive benefits of morning sunlight by 70%.
I know.
So, so a window, a car window, sunglasses, contact lenses.
Yes, contacts are the worst, right? Because they're insidious. Like people,
well, then
you wear contact lenses, you never leave home without them.
Yeah. And a lot of people live in sunglasses, and a lot of people never see direct light because there's a window or a car window between them and the light. So getting outside. So you really do have to get outside for an amount of time in the morning, because remember, until recently, all light was red.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the sun, torches, lamps, candles, everything was red.
You mean the artificial light? Yeah, I mean,
our electric light is fairly recent, and certainly a blue electric light is very recent.
Right. But I mean, what I mean to say is, even in the spectrum of the sun, you have different shades of light. You have red, you have blue, you have. I mean, blue light in and of itself is not the enemy. It's the wrong blue light at the wrong time.
Yeah, I mean, white light contains all colors, of course.
Right.
But it's still essential, the sun, and even white, what you can only get pure white light from an artificial source.
Right.
Yeah, you don't get white light from the sun.
Right.
You get some. There's some blue light in that because there's some UV in that, but it's predominantly it's predominantly infrared, right? It's predominantly at the red end.
Okay. So the darkness retreat is intriguing. Again, I think it's one of those, it's a more extreme form of resetting a system. And I would think that just as before you jump into a cold plunge, you have to prepare your body, you have your nervous system already has to be in a place where it can deal with that shock. Going to a dark retreat, again, you need to be at a certain stage in your, I don't know, maybe call it your evolution, whatever it may be, before you can even think of taking that on. Even a silent retreat, honestly. Like, I have a good friend who I consider to be one of the most grounded people I know, who walked out of a silent retreat after 3 days. Like, it was too much for him to bear at that point in his life.
My experience is about 50% of people walk out in the first 3 days.
Yeah. It wasn't going to work. And good for him for recognizing that, right?
Yeah. But to go straight into a 10-day silent retreat is not a great idea. You should do, have a few days on your own at home without talking to anyone, and then do a weekend, and then do a few, So, and also, going straight into a 10-day dark retreat would also not be a great idea.
No, it actually sounds like a horrible idea.
If you're not used to cold, diving into an icy lake is a really bad idea.
Correct.
You should have had months of cold showers, or little dips up to your knees or whatever first.
Correct.
Yes, absolutely. You have to. There's no benefit to shock, trauma, or catharsis. There's no benefit.
Right.
And people tend to think, it's easy to think that the more dramatic the response and the reaction, if you end up crying and screaming, that's a good thing, and it just isn't.
Correct.
All it does is recode trauma back into the connective tissue.
And this gets to the root of the problem, the issue, let's not call it the problem, but the root of the issue is this encoding of trauma, chronic stress, whatever we want, whatever it is, into tissue. We seem to think, and you mentioned this earlier, or we've been led to believe that we can think our way out of these situations or talk our way out of these situations. And I mean, look, there's definitely value to consciously acknowledging and getting our heads around ideas and concepts that may be stepping in our way. But the ultimate, to really truly work our way out of this stuff has to involve a piece of physical, somatic, something that allows the tissue to release the trauma.
It has to involve the body. It has to involve the body. And all modern techniques, psychotherapy is relatively recent. Remember, it's only been around for a bit over 100 years. So the kind of body-orientated psychotherapy has been around for thousands of years. But what we now call, now that we've given them names,
right,
like trauma release therapy and somatic experiencing, etc. Those are relatively new. The mostly non-talking based body psychotherapies. But remember, we've had a body for hundreds of millions of years. We've had a thinking brain for moments in comparison.
Right.
But of course, totally acknowledging that it's our human thinking brain that's created and invented all this stuff that's got us to where we are now. For good and for bad.
Yeah, exactly.
Humans are the ones that experience depression and anxiety and suffering in a way that animals, or indeed even children, don't tend to. Under normal circumstances.
Exactly. I mean, children can experience plenty, but
of course they can. But in a nurturing community, or an animal in the wild, their natural state doesn't tend usually towards depression, anxiety, or trauma.
Right.
Especially with an animal, they either get eaten or they escape, and if they escape, they pant and they shake, and then they get on with it. They don't become trauma. You don't get PTSD in any way like the same form in animals that you do in humans, because we inhibit our release process through to cultural conditioning. We feel too ashamed, too guilty, too bad to shake, to cry, to scream. Often at the time of the event, we'll go into shock, or often too afraid. A child who has an alcoholic father, will be too afraid to express those emotions when he hears the key in the door,
Right.
So there's lots and lots of ways in which complex human society predisposes us towards overwhelming feelings, absolutely. And I think, if we look at what most people, the majority of, let's call it the developed world, suffer from today, it isn't the same things that people would have even a few generations ago. So it's not malnutrition, it's not acute infectious disease on the whole. What most of us are being made ill from and then dying from over quite a long period of time is preventable diseases of lifestyle.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the primary epigenetic influencer, the thing that turns good genes on and bad genes off, or the other way around, is stress.
Yeah. Chronic.
If we're not looking at how we manage and deactivate the negative impact of stress on our body, our mind, our genes, then we're not looking at things holistically.
Correct. So great. So let's bring another very specific body part into the conversation now. Let's talk a little bit about the vagus nerve, because again, 10 years ago, even though it was well known, it was people have known about the vagus nerve for a long time. I think that it has entered it's bubbling up into common vernacular a lot more, and people are more aware that they even have a vagus nerve. And then this whole idea of what the vagus nerve is quickly, where it runs, what it does, and how important it is to helping us to regulate and or reset our nervous system is really getting to the nut of one of the things that we can do to help our bodies to be more anti-fragile.
No, I mean, the vagus nerve is very important. But as you say, you would think it had just been discovered, wouldn't you? Because the way it's being talked about now. And to be honest, most neurologists still wouldn't ascribe to the vagus nerve the functions that people within the kind of well-being sphere do. So, we give it meaning and purpose, which is beyond its function as just a conduit for wiring.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's a very, very ancient nerve. It goes everywhere in the body, starts the brainstem, wanders down through the left ear, through the throat, and through all the organs down to the pelvic floor effectively. So it controls all the autonomic nervous system organs, all the stuff which you wouldn't be able to think about doing. So breathing, peristalsis, heartbeat, sweating. And it regulates, the way I think it's most interesting to think about is that it regulates the internal world and the external world.
Right.
So it regulates your relationship between how you feel, your own internal balance, homeostasis, and how the outside world is responding to that. So that's why so many of the health issues that we see in the modern world generally, but particularly which are due to stress, are to do with the autonomic nervous system. So stuff like palpitations, anxiety of the heart, breathing issues, tight chest, anything to do with the gut.
Yes.
Because of the relationship between peristalsis, the vagus being literally the anatomical foundation for what we call the brain-gut axis. The gut is the fifth brain, right? So it's the enteric nervous system, it's the feeling brain, and it's the vagus nerve that connects that to our thinking, logical brain, which of course isn't just all of our brain. Our brain contains many complex functions, but a big part of it is the logical, numerical, if you like, aspects. And then it does go right down into the pelvis. So it does have a urogenitory, a sexual function effect, and it connects with either all or most of the senses. Okay. So it is this kind of relationship between how you feel internally, how you're being regulated, your balance, your homeostasis, and the sensory information that's coming in, the interoception that's coming in. So some people refer to it as the well-being nerve, the nerve that enables connection and contact between you and people, animals, things, nature. And this also therefore tells you about what affects it.
Right.
So And the vagus nerve is, we like it and we talk about it because it's the largest branch of the autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. So, it's great to focus and understand the vagus, but we should also understand that it's only part of the autonomic nervous system. Yeah,
Right.
and it's the autonomic nervous system as a whole that does all these functions that we just talked about.
Right.
So,
but yet the vagus nerve gives us access to a piece of that nervous system that maybe gets out of balance, and that we can directly affect in a variety of different ways to kind of try and help to restore. Ultimately we're looking for balance. We're not trying to boost it. We're not trying to suppress it. All we're looking for is it's like HRV, right? Heart rate variability, the space between heartbeats. And the idea that, if you think about it, you're like, well, my heart needs to beat like a metronome. And getting past that notion and understanding that actually what you want is for your heart to be in such a relaxed state that it might seem like a metronome at first glance, but actually there's variation in the spaces between heartbeats because it's not rigidly
in fact, the last thing you want, and I know that's exactly why you're saying it, the last thing you want is for your heart to be like a metronome.
Right. Exactly.
The way I phrase that is that if something can't bend, it breaks.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. So HRV, and remember, HRV is an expression of vagal nerve tone.
Right.
So I started
being brought it up.
Yeah. So I started being interested in HRV 20, 30 years ago, and then I realized, okay, well, let's cut to the chase, and let's become interested in the thing that regulates HRV, that regulates gut peristalsis, that regulates the heartbeat, that regulates blood pressure, that regulates all the things actually we're interested in. So rather than try and look at those individually, let's go to the source and work out how can we benefit and influence the primary mechanism that influences everything else that we're interested in, and that appears to be vagal nerve tone. Yeah, if we are in a somewhat unholistic way trying to reduce it to one thing, we can probably say vagal nerve tone is the most important metric that we can think about. And tone is an interesting word, right? Because we talk about muscle tone. Yeah, we don't normally talk about nerve tone, but nerves do have and with muscle tone, muscles only really contract. So when you do weightlifting or you do any kind of muscle work, you're causing muscle fibers to get thicker, and the muscle builds up, increasing the tone, the contractile capability of the muscle. But as soon as you stop doing that, it will atrophy, and within 10 minutes of leaving the gym, your muscles are atrophying, right? What's interesting about
that's a rather negative look, but yes, that's kind of an extreme statement, but okay.
Which isn't to say it's not a good thing. It just means you need to get back and do it again, right? Yeah. And you need to do daily exercise. That's just how it is. But nerve tone, once you've increased the tone of a nerve, it's permanent. It's forever. And nerves are forever. So when you do an activity that lays down neurons in a specific neural network, those are there forever. Now, it may be the case that another neural network is louder.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've got a really powerful motorway neural network around drinking a bottle of whiskey every day, and a small one around the relaxation response, then the motorway is going to be louder, right? So it's going to win out until you've done enough relaxation work so that then becomes more powerful and becomes the default compared to the more destructive habit. But we are what we do. So habits are simply what we repeat.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So if we do 10 minutes, half an hour, whatever, of certain things every day, every time we do that, we lay down neurons in that neural network, and that path becomes stronger. And eventually that will be what we are. That will be who we are. So, for a long time, I worked using meditation and breathing to get people to do that, to repeat an activity, to lay it down. But it became obvious, as I was saying before, that people's ability to engage with that was increasingly difficult. And I think the thing that people don't say enough about meditation and breathing is how hard they are.
Oh no, I think, yeah, no, I think partially that's why it's the cheapest solution to the problem, if you will, and
Well,
yet
it's
it
free,
remains the
right?
most elusive,
Yeah,
right?
it's the
It's free,
simplest
but
thing.
it's the
It's the
most
simplest
elusive.
thing. Yeah, it's,
Yeah.
nothing could be simpler than do nothing.
No, and more difficult. It's like
And
trying
more
to, you know.
difficult because
So
we are
yeah,
human doings, not human beings. So just being is very difficult for us, right?
correct. Human doing that. I like that.
And
So
because we are so neurologically overwhelmed, the ability to do little has really declined. So that's why using and every culture has developed versions of this. So
mhm.
using an external mechanism to enable your system to go into the relaxation response is really critical.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. So just going back to the vagus nerve for just a couple more minutes, because there's there's now a a I mean, every day I get it. I mean, every day you hear, I mean, I don't know if it's every day, but we're constantly seeing new devices coming out, being offered to people. And we have vagal nerve, and they all just, many of them describe themselves the same way, but there seem to be two major categories in vagal nerve devices that are coming out. There's the vagal nerve toning, as you just described, which is, it's almost like, think of it as a fitness routine for your vagus nerve, so that it is able to if it was a muscle, we want it to be able to contract and relax appropriately given the right stimulus. And we would hope for our vagus nerve also to be able to fire and relax appropriately given the right circumstances and stimulus. Versus we have another set of devices that are vagal nerve stimulation devices, which work a little bit differently. I think the end goal is the same. The idea is, can we help our vagal response to be appropriate more often, so that our nerve is not in a constant state of contraction or firing, let's say. And you know, you've repeatedly mentioned the effect of the vagus nerve on gut peristalsis, and this is where, you know, things like IBS, IBD, irritable, like these irritable bowel disorders are intrinsically linked. Like, these are not problems with the physical bowel itself necessarily. It's a problem of the nervous system, and goes to mental state and all, you know. And of course there's gut microbiome, there's so many things involved, but at the end of the day, it's a nervous system that's firing maybe inappropriately at the wrong times, or not firing. So anyway, so this is a very long-winded way of saying, can we make a little bit of a distinction between our vagal toning concept and our vagal stimulation concept, and the different devices? And not that we have to go through the different devices, but let's at least talk about those buckets.
Yeah, I mean, I've always made quite a clear distinction, and we started talking about the vagus nerve, me and my clinic, 20 odd years ago. I think that work's largely been done now, so
Yeah.
we're now beginning to talk about other things like anti-fragility, because the vagus nerve is so much more in the mainstream, relatively speaking. But I mean, stimulation, and these are not hard and fast definitions.
No.
So there is a bit of variation on opinion here. But what I would say is that when you talk about stimulation, you're talking about electrical microcurrent. Yeah, you're using an electrical device to mechanically or electrically stimulate something to contract.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how a TENS machine works, a transcutaneous electrical nerve stimulation device. It's how a vagus nerve stimulation technology works. And you pop it on the skin, or you attach it internally to the vagus nerve, and it sends a current, and it makes it, like making a frog's legs twitch.
Correct.
Using electrical current, you're making something contract and twitch. Toning for me has a much more holistic, and the term vagal tone, vagal tone is standard. That's how you refer to the upregulation and downregulation capacity of the vagus nerve. And interestingly, Stephen Porges now talks about vagal flexibility, which I like, actually. I think that's
yeah.
I think that's probably a better term to talk about vagal flexibility,
Mm-hmm.
adaptability, because it's all about the ability to adapt. But I think, when we use sound, so we're using broad spectrum sound, infrasound up to audible sound, and that that, generally speaking, doesn't have the ability to make tissue do something it doesn't want to do.
So it's a gentler It's a less intrusive approach in some
It's
ways
less
than
invasive, it's
stimulation.
gentler. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not associated with adverse response. Whereas obviously something, if you're forcing tissue to do something that maybe it doesn't want to do, that can be really useful in an emergency situation where the person might otherwise not make it. But in a situation where people are dealing with lifestyle issues, yeah, and that which may involve severe symptomology, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then really, what from my point of view, you're trying to work holistically, and you're trying to encourage the body to become more anti-fragile, more resilient, more able to cope, rather than try and make it do something it literally can't do. So toning is a gentler, less invasive approach. For
Mm-hmm.
me, it's more holistic.
Yeah.
It involves the mind and the body, yeah, because we are creatures of mind and body and feeling. Whereas using electrical stimulation is potentially aggressive and is a essentially a mechanical process.
Right. Right. And okay. So now let's go back to the idea of toning and flexibility. And it's a little bit like, I mean, it's like, if we think about it, every health goal that we want to go to, in the end, when we look at the best iteration, it's about flexibility. We want metabolic flexibility, for example, right? It would be great to be able to eat a ton of carbs all the time, but we need to be able to tap into our fat burning systems on occasion. And going back to your idea of allowing yourself to be hungry, well, you can only really allow yourself to be hungry and be uncomfortable in that sense if your body is metabolically flexible enough to burn whatever you've got as stored energy for fuel, versus constantly relying on this constant input of energy through food.
Yeah, I mean, we have become the dominant species on the planet by being adaptable.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So we want to create that adaptability.
Yeah, yeah.
In every system we can.
There's nothing that we do other than higher thinking, which another animal doesn't do better than us.
That's a good idea. That's an interesting.
Yeah. We're not the best climbers, we're not the best swimmers, we're not the best runners, but we do have hands that work in a particular way, and we can problem solve in a fairly unique way. So this has enabled us to be where we are. I've now completely forgotten how that relates to the question you asked.
That's okay. It's all good. So yeah, I'm basically just trying. I want to move us back to this notion of vagal toning and how important that flexibility is. It's not even that it's important; it's our natural state that we want to be able to get back to, right?
Yeah.
Ultimately, what we're trying to do in most cases is go back to the original wiring, or the original wiring before the world convinced us that we needed to be in a constant state of stress and anxiety
well, listen, if health is a state of grace, a state of ease, then when we have dis-ease or imbalance, or homeostasis is lacking. Homeostasis, as you know, is the balance, the ridiculously complicated balance that's going on microsecond by microsecond inside your body.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what goes on just to keep you upright is astonishing.
It is. It absolutely
utterly astonishing how complex and evolved it is. So the fact that it works most of the time is a miracle.
Mm-hmm.
Quite honestly. But the more adaptable, the more adaptogenic, the more flexible we are, the more anti-fragile we are, then the more we can roll with the punches.
Absolutely.
And life throws punches, right? There's nothing you can do about that. Mm-hmm. Nobody is immune from life's punches.
Yep. Yep. In many in a million different ways. So moving along our conversation here to the role of the vagus nerve in allowing us to become more flexible, to be able to bend as we need to in a resilient way so that we can bounce back. Mm-hmm. And this methodology that you've developed that helps us to develop, if you will, that flexibility over time.
Well, so vibration would have been our first sense. before we had eyes or ears, we would have sensed the world around us through vibration. You know, whether to eat it, whether to run away from it, whether to have sex with it, you know, that would all have been down to vibration. And we've evolved from there, right? To have now, you know, complex senses. They reckon maybe 23, 24 senses, not the Aristotelian 5 that we were supposedly allocated. There are many, many, many senses, including things like interoception, you know, the ability to proprioception. There's all kinds of really interesting senses, which are as much to do, in fact, more to do with fascia, connective tissue, and the vagus nerve and associated mechanisms than they are to do with the eyes and ears and the things we tend to think of as the senses. So we have vibration and sound receptors in our body that are additional to our ears. Now, this hasn't been studied terribly well because, you know, it's we tend to think of sound as being, you know, entirely ear-based, oral-based. We have obviously cochlear implants for people with hearing issues. We have bone conduction headsets for people who need to have open ears but still be able to receive messages, whether it's special forces or bike messengers or whatever it might be. So we do understand. Beethoven, who was deaf, of course, was one of the first proponents of bone conduction. Right, he had a metal bar attached to his piano, which he would bite so that he could hear the music while composing. That's how Beethoven, because he started to go deaf from the age of 20. So, you know, the idea of hearing sound through channels other than the eardrum is well established.
Yeah. Well, and if you think about it, when we listen to music that moves us,
yes,
it is a somatic experience. You feel it in your body.
Exactly. You would say, I feel the music. Nobody would say, I think the music.
No.
I was moved by the music. I felt it, that music. I felt that whatever. Absolutely. And I think a part, and it's not me saying this, it's been hypothesized that part of what we call the religious experience is based on large buildings or large stones, circles or buildings, and the use of low frequency sound and the way that they generate a sensation of awe and wonder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So a feeling of awe, which is an interesting combination of feeling slightly scared and hugely inspired at the same time. That's, you know, that's pretty much the definition of awe.
Right.
It can be very transformational. Yeah, we feel, and it's the kind of thing that early astronauts felt. A lot of people feel when they see their baby for the first time, when they get to the top of the mountain. There were these moments, key awe-filled moments, which have a massive effect on how we feel, and they're mediated via the vagus nerve and the rest of the connective tissue. But Dacher Keitner's the guy to read about this. But trying to introduce moments of small awe, daily awe into your life is incredibly beneficial in terms of creating a kind of feedback loop. And that's really just down to gratitude and appreciation. So just stopping and noticing how amazing that flower is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or list that bird that that's there the whole time, maybe you don't hear, and think, oh my God, that is so beautiful. That bird, and getting up 10 minutes early so you can see the sun come up. You know, trying to build in moments of awe into your life is incredibly important, because we are hardwired to love nature.
Yes.
There is nothing else. Well, there's literally nothing else in the world. We are all on life support. We're all on nature's life support. And we are hardwired over hundreds of millions of years to be nurtured and to feel safe and to have positive feedback from biophilic sounds, and so the sight of trees, the smell of nature, the sounds of nature, the sounds of water, wind. How many people find rain really soothing?
Yeah, for sure.
And it's hard. It's not like that's why would you find rain soothing? I mean, there's lots. There are possible reasons, but so almost everything, and of course we're also then made afraid by certain types of growls, by darkness, by certain sounds, etc. So we have these very profound survival responses, nurture and survival responses, which are almost entirely tied into our exposure to nature. So there really is, I mean, the great, the nature is the great teacher, along with playing with your comfort zone. That's that's what you can do, making sure that you're in nature. And if you're in a city, that might just mean staring at a pot plant, right? Whatever you can do, looking at a tree outside a window.
Right.
There's no substitute for our connection with nature.
Correct. Well, there's a whole branch, if you will, of mental health that's linked to this whole nature deficit disorder that pervasive in society. But so the cutting people off from nature ultimately is going, and I think we could all agree that there's a big piece of that at work in the current state of the world right now. It's just being cut off from the natural world. But moving back towards this, the importance of vibration, right? And it's funny you mentioned how many people find rain soothing. They don't actually find the sight of rain as soothing as they find the sound of rain.
Exactly.
Right. And I know people in their cottages who've put tin roofs, and that pitter patter, the sound of the rain on the tin roof is what they find incredibly soothing. So
a lot of people will use rain and even storms to go to sleep because they find it, it soothes them. A lot of people use colored noise for anxiety and to go to sleep because that mimics the sound of the environment around us when we were maybe sleeping in the forest, the sound of insects, the rustle of leaves, anything which mimics nature. That's why we like fire, right? Because it signifies safety. Human beings have gathered around the fire for hundreds of thousands of years. So we have a strong affinity that's hardwired into our system to feel safe around certain sounds, and definitely around nature. And as I say, because we have these vibration sensors in our body, not just our ears, I believe that probably maybe something like 50% of the sound experience is physical, not oral as in AURA. So of course we hear sound, and we hear the nuance of sound, the little trills and the sparkles, and you think of an orchestra, so the little bits the flute's doing and the cymbals are doing and the triangle and the horn section, etc. The high notes, you only really perceive that via the ears, and that's what gives music its color and its spectrum and its beauty. But also without the felt sense of music, like if you turn the treble up on your hi-fi and turn the bass right down, you end up with this like cheap hi-fi tinny sound.
Yeah, nobody likes that.
Nobody likes that.
No. Yeah?
And they might not even know why they don't like it. But unless music, unless sound is embodied, it doesn't feel right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so societies around the world have developed ways to act on this, whether it's humming, chanting, omming, singing, drumming,
tapping,
tapping, absolutely,
the tapping techniques, very similar, right?
Yeah, this kind of rhythmic, and in the case of some cultures, monotonous rhythmic beating, rhythmic drumming, to produce a kind of a brain entrainment. So and that only makes sense once you know what the hertz, the cycle rate is of the particular brain waves. But if you know what those are, then you can try and entrain brains into dream states, into relaxation states, into wakeful creative states by using particular patterns of frequency, right?
Right, exactly. Which is in large part what we're going to talk about as well, right? So because you've done that work.
Well, that's what we do. That's what we do. Yeah.
And I think that, I'll just share that when I first got Sensate, I didn't fully get it, right? So it sat in its box for a little while, and I was too busy, which is this crazy idea that we kind of have put around ourselves. And when I finally got it out of the box and charged it up and used it for the first time, I was like, oh, wait, no, this is really interesting, because the way that Sensate, to describe it to people, the way that Sensate works, we have an audio track coming from our phone, but that audio is being, right, preferably through headphones, but that audio is being translated into vibration through this device called the Sensate that we put on our chest, that, like, it literally translates the sounds back into, it sounds like, no, not exactly. Anyway, it felt
yeah.
like.
Can I make just an important correction? There's no reason
Yeah,
why you
please
would.
do.
So,
Yeah.
the what you feel, the low frequency or infrasound that you feel through the device on the chest,
Mm-hmm.
which is then propagated through bone into the thoracic cavity, which acts like a kind of speaker cabinet and makes the body pulse, right?
Yeah.
So what is emitted by the device isn't just the bass end of what you're hearing.
No.
So it's a completely separate, orchestrated, composed piece. So it's, so if you think of our pieces are like orchestrations. Yeah, most of it you can hear, but like, if you're sitting in a concert hall, you can't hear the oboe or the tuba.
No.
But it's
there.
there.
Yeah. It's part of the package.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So the infrasound is orchestrated, but it's not part of what you hear.
Oh, that's okay. Well, that's interesting, because I kind of imagined that it was a piece of the audio. Like, my favorite track that I've listened to so far is the Sound Bowls and Chants. There's something about that track that, for me, hits it, even if I'm going.
So temple or nebula, probably.
Yeah, and there's something about it that, and it's not necessarily a sleep track, and yet I will use it at bedtime and have the best sleep, and it shows up in my scores the next day. It shows up in my HRV. And
we did a study recently that showed that Sensate users got 1 hour of extra sleep a night and fell asleep 28 minutes quicker than they had prior to not using it.
Right. So these are people, obviously, who have trouble sleeping. So, and so what's interesting is I'm a person who doesn't have trouble with sleep, and still it has a positive impact on my sleep and my resilience. Right.
Yeah.
So it shows up in my HRV as a better score, because those are two different ends of the spectrum. We have the people who can't sleep, and if you can help those guys, holy jumping, right? Like, that is one of the worst problems in society right now, along with stress and anxiety, contributing to stress and anxiety.
Well, that's the most common feedback is assistance to sleep. Yes.
Yeah. But for those of us who, we fall asleep, we mostly stay asleep, we do fine. To be able to hone our sleep, to be able to get more out of the hours that we put in, because I don't want to have to sleep 10 hours to get more. I want to get more out of my 7 hours or 7.5 hours. I want to be
exactly. There's sleep and there's sleep, isn't there?
Exactly. But there's other applications for Sensate. So now we know. So Sensate works through sound and through this what's it called? Soma-acoustic, right? So the somatic experience of the physical Sensate sitting on the chest and doing what it does.
So it's all sound. Some of it you hear, and some of it you feel.
I keep making that mistake, right?
But it's all sound. But I mean, that sounds like a simplification. But of course, everything in the universe is vibration and sound. So,
so it's a different form of vibration. So, but it's not just for sleep. So there are different programs. There's different tracks. So
there's some stuff to use in the morning to wake up to kind of get your cortisol firing. But mostly the use case is down regulation and relaxation, because that's where the primary issue is.
Right.
I've never, I meet lots of people who are anxious and stressed and think they and need to relax. Many of whom think they want to do more.
Mm-hmm.
But very few people need to do more. But most people, and in fact, most people will do more if they can ground themselves more and they can be more relaxed. Because it's like, if your adrenaline and stress hormones are terrible ways to achieve anything.
Yeah.
It's like having half a dozen espressos and then trying to write something. It's like, it's not a good way to get anything done.
Mm-hmm.
So you might feel like you're running around. Well, you probably are running around, but I don't mean you. In one might feel like one's being highly productive, but it's kind of empty productivity. It's an empty energy, and then you're likely to crash afterwards.
Well, I was going to say you may get away with it and get a lot done for a period of time, but at some point you run out of steam, right? And the idea is to have this constant flow of energy that is healthy so that you don't burn out. The running on adrenaline concept works really well until it stops working completely.
Until it doesn't, exactly. Until it doesn't. And I mean, yes, sleep is a big thing. Lots of people say, oh, it's brilliant, it helps me go to sleep. A lot of people say, I didn't know I had a sleep problem until I started using Sensate, and then I realized I did. I mean, we're not a medical device, so we don't make a lot of medical claims, but what people very, very consistently report to us is that they didn't realize how stressed and anxious they were until they felt more relaxed.
Right. Well, which is the case, right? We don't realize how much pain we live with until we get rid of the pain. We don't realize.
Yeah.
And we don't realize that we have digestive issues until we don't.
Yeah.
For many people, they'll say to me, I had no idea how bloated I was or how tired I felt after meals until suddenly we've done something to optimize their digestion. And they're like, holy crap, I feel completely different.
Exactly. And also what the thing that keeps us going, because startup life is not easy, there's a lot of work and it's hard to develop products and to keep up with customer expectation the whole time with a small agile team, but it's the user information and feedback coming in that keeps us all going. People writing in spontaneously, literally every day saying, you've changed my life.
There's nothing quite like that to keep you going, right?
No, exactly. One of my favorites was a US soldier, actually, who with PTSD post-combat, who hadn't been able to leave the house for 5 years. Within a week of using Sensate, he was out for dinner with his family. Wow. And so that had changed the lives of 5 people.
Well, at least. I mean, the satellite effect of changing one life is incredible. And so, all right, so we don't have, we're going to have to kind of wind up at some point. So why don't we get in, let's just, stop being around the bush here. And what is the best way for people to use Sensate to get the most benefit? And I'm sure it's going to depend on why you're using it, but let's say we say, for people who feel that they're in an anxious state too often and don't seem to be able to access some of these, whether it's meditation or breath work, and that doesn't really work for them, how would they use a Sensate to help themselves?
What I would say is trust our expertise. Yeah, so follow the use case. It's very tempting to try and do more or less. People that want to, listen to some, books while meditating or whatever it might be. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people will try and work or try and meditate or try and be in the gym while using their Sensate around their neck. The use case, what we ask people to do is 10 minutes once a day, lying back or reclining with headphones on and your eyes closed. Yeah, and then you choose the track, you hit go, you put it in the right place, and you just, and then you don't do anything. You don't try to do anything. You don't try and breathe. You don't try and relax. And there's, and we always see this when we do demos and things. There's this magic moment that happens around minute 7 or 8, the first time users who are kind of lying there, and you can kind of see them thinking, yeah, all right, it's very nice. And then about minute 7 or 8, for the vast majority of people, not everyone, you suddenly see this, and the body just relax, and a bit like, I think you were just saying something similar. The body just suddenly understands and gets it and allows you to switch off and surrender. For some people that takes maybe several sessions or even a week. For the vast majority of people, it happens within a few sessions. And so just allowing yourself to be soothed, without trying to do anything. Some people do, and that's 10 minutes once a day. Some people do several sessions or longer sessions because they really like it.
Yeah.
And that's really important because we repeat what we like.
Mm-hmm.
There are plenty of therapies, including vagus nerve stimulation therapies, which are quite unpleasant.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody particularly wants to be tasered on the neck.
No.
But even though there's some great research for some of these things, like for migraine, for instance, I could never get people to use them because they didn't like them.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, if it doesn't feel good, you're not going to do it. And so, I mean, and to that end, I think that it speaks to the variety of options out there. But I do think that with the Sensate, it's a very low barrier to entry because ultimately it's pleasant. Like it feels good
It feels
and
good. It's
it's
effective.
easy.
It's
Yeah.
easy. It feels good. It's effective. It's enjoyable. You want to do it again.
Yeah.
And there isn't an in the moment immediate effect, but of course, there's also a cumulative effect. Every time you do a Sensate session, you're laying down some neurons in that relaxation response neural network.
Mm-hmm.
When you've done that 20 times, that neural network is just that much more robust.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's that whole idea of the, what is it? Nerves that wire together, fire together. And
Together, yeah,
just,
Carla Schatz, exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So we are what we do, but with nerves in particular, it's a permanent change.
Yeah.
If and as long as you do enough of it, that then becomes the default.
Yeah, no, and it's so case use applications. So we have daytime use as a, if nothing else, as a 10-minute pause in your day to
Yeah,
help
I mean,
that.
definitely do a 10-minute pause. You can do much more than that if you want to. You can use it for sleep preparation.
Yeah.
Yeah, so a session before going into bed. A lot of people do that. A lot of people get on really well with that. Just a quick note about position,
Yes.
because it does seem to confuse people. I mean, it's always on the midline, right? So it's on the midline of the chest bone, which is called the sternum. It comes with a lanyard, so it kind of hangs in that position anyway, even though you're kind of lying down. It can still be quite good to have it there, just because a lot of people, when they're very relaxed, they'll stand up and it will go flying because they forget it, they fall asleep. I like to use it personally inside the bag, the neoprene bag that it comes with. I put it
Oh,
inside
you
the bag.
do. Interesting.
And then I put it between two layers of clothing. So I don't put it on skin. I put it between a t-shirt and a jumper or similar, that which also holds it there. And
Mm-hmm.
you know the position's right, because if it's too high, you're kind of feeling it in your neck. If it's too low, it's not on the sternum, it's on the abdomen. It's got to be on bone.
Okay.
And because everybody's thoracic architecture is a bit different, part of the way that Sensate works is through this kind of anatomical bespokeness. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so it will respond in slightly different positions on each person. So you can move it up or down, a centimeter, till you find the spot that feels most pleasant and resonant for you.
Oh, interesting.
And that'll be the spot where your thoracic architecture is humming most effectively.
Hmm. So definitely, so playing with the position is a thing. I've never used it in the neoprene bag. I tend to use it directly on the skin. So I'm
You
gonna
can
have,
do. I mean, it's just a little. Yeah, I mean, I think it's just.
there it
Uh,
is. I just found it
yeah, there you go. So
right here.
I use it. I use it in the bag, between two layers of clothing, not directly on the skin. New users, I would always say, start on low.
Mm-hmm.
Occasionally, we get somebody that says, "I got it," and I put it on 11 and wore it for 6 hours. And no, don't do that. Don't do that.
That's a
I mean,
bit
it's
much.
start. Yeah, I mean, it's like allow your system a bit of exposure. It's new.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, unless you've done a lot of work in this kind of area, it's going to be new for you. So use it on low for a few sessions, build up slowly, use it in the bag, and you'll love it.
Allow your journey. So that's also an important point to mention to people is you are in control here. So you can control the intensity of the vibration very easily through your app, and you
Yeah,
control the volume of the sound that you're getting through the ears as
exactly.
well through the app. So
Yeah,
what's interesting is you are in charge of the journey, but once you've decided how much stimulation you want, now the device takes over and delivers, the program, as it were, to your
exactly.
body.
Once you've set the volume level you like, which might change over time, but once you set
Mhm.
the level you like, you then just lie back and do nothing.
Yeah. And I think I really like what you said earlier. You do nothing in the sense that you're giving yourself that physical pause, but if your brain wanders, it's okay. Like it's, I think a big part of Sensate is not stressing about clearing your mind, about
Yeah,
any of
totally.
that. You don't have to do that work necessarily. It may happen naturally over time, but in a way, you can just allow this thing to do what it's doing in the context of whatever's happening
Yeah,
for you?
Michelle, who I work with, says that, which I love. She says you can't fail at using Sensate.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, actually, you can very, very much fail with meditation. So, if you do need to do something for 10,000 hours to become an expert at it,
Yeah.
um, if you were doing an hour a day, that would be a long time. In
Mhm.
fact, most people attempting to do an hour of meditation a day are probably doing 5 minutes of
Yeah.
actual meditation.
Yeah.
So
Well, it takes a long time.
10,000 hours in 5 minute chunks. Nobody's got that long.
No, no, no. It's more time than we're allotted. So, so, so yeah. So Sensate. So
Yeah.
this is Sensate. Welcome to the world of Sensate, guys. I have to say that, like I said, it took me a little while to get my Sensate out of the box because I had so much going on and so much travel. But once I got out of the box, I've not been far from it from that day. And as I said, I mean, I've been really amazed for someone who sleeps reasonably well at how much of an impact it's had on my sleep and my stress resilience. So, and it makes it easy for me to use, right? I mean, I'm a person today after this podcast, I've got meetings every hour to half hour through the day. So that's for me to find more than 10 minutes. I mean, I probably won't on a day like today find the time to lie back, but at the end of the day, I can at least know that there's something that's going to hopefully knock
at the
me
end
out.
of the day or lunchtime or morning.
Yeah.
I'm a 50-year meditator and I use Sensei every day.
Right. Yeah. Well, there you go. Right. So it's in addition to. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, sir. Well, where do we send people to learn even more about Sensate? And maybe if they want to get their hands on one and give it a try, where can they go?
The website's getsensate.com. I think if they do /nat, they get to a page which is specific for you as well. On getsensate.com, there's obviously information about the team, about the science. If you scroll right down to the bottom, because we're not particularly pushing it, but there is a blog button.
Yeah.
So there is actually an archive of articles, but you have to scroll down to the bottom, and there's a lot of interesting information there as well, obviously, in the articles.
For sure. And there's also a link to a study that you did last year, Feb 2022, in 2022 on Sensate and people's feelings of perceived stress and anxiety, and that's a really
actually we've done a lot more and better studies since then as well, bigger studies since then, which I think aren't on the website yet. One I mentioned, which showed an hour of extra sleep and falling asleep half an hour sooner, etc. Another one which showed improvements to heart rate and changes to theta wave in the brain, etc. So we have a program of ongoing studies and research, and that's going, and we'll probably, the first piece will probably be published in an academic journal at the end of this year, but we're starting to put stuff up on the website as well.
Fabulous. Okay, so it's getsensate.com/nat, and that I believe will save you guys a little bit of money on your purchase. Right. And Stefan, do you also do you have an Instagram account as well? I think you do.
Of course there is. If you search Sensate on Instagram, on Facebook, on I think we do have a Twitter. I'm not sure. Twitter's not something we particularly use. Instagram and Facebook in particular are places you will find us if you just search Sensate.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, you're so welcome. It's always lovely to talk about the product because I think it's, we want to change the world, and it's lovely to speak to someone like you.
Thank you so much. The feeling is mutual. I appreciate your time today. Thanks so much. And your incredible work in this space. Thank you for bringing Sensate to the world.
Thank you so much. My pleasure.